try that.
Hello. Hello. Hi. Good afternoon. My name is Mike Lucas. I'm the curator of historical archaeology here at the New York State Museum. And you guys are in for a treat today. We've got a behind-the-scenes talk by Dr. Peter Fix behind me here. He's going to be telling you all you need to know about what they're doing here and the process of, where we are now and where we're going to hopefully be in maybe a month. A few things in advance. So, 15 years ago, in 2010, a ship was found in Lower Manhattan during the construction of the Visitor Security Center as part of the construction of the One World Trade Center. Archaeologists on the scene from AKRF, in fact, we've got one of the archaeologists here in the audience who was there at the time, recognized they had a ship that was under about 22 feet of fill. So imagine, fill, and then 22 feet down there was a ship. The reason why it was under fill like that is because most of Manhattan, a lot of Manhattan at least, is made land. So they would use things like logs to make cribbing to fill the river so they could build houses and expand New York City. So the ship was part of that. And so they knew it was important. They stopped the construction. They brought a specialist in, Dr. Warren Reese, who's a specialist in ship excavation, archaeological excavation. They had 9 days, I think it was 9 days, right, to excavate, which is, if you see all the wood here, that's not very much time. So they were able to do that, get all the wood out safely, and then it went down to a conservation lab in Maryland where they did some initial cleaning of the wood, and then it went to Texas A&M University in their conservation lab in 2011. So since 2011, Dr. Fix and his team of conservation specialists, and there's 4 people, there's a team of 4, Dr. Fix and his 3 team members, and they are, so over this past 10 to 15 years, they've been trying to figure out what it is. They've been doing the conservation on the ship, and then finally it's made its way to the New York State Museum. So Dr. Fix is going to give you guys an update on where we are with this ship, and I'm sure you'll probably have a lot of questions at the end. And so without further ado, Dr. Peter Fix.
How's that? That's better. I can hear myself echoing. Okay. So what we have here is a big pile of mess in some cases. A huge 3-dimensional jigsaw puzzle that's going to be put back together. We don't have the full picture from the box. We have to use our intuition. We have to look at each little piece, and if there's a scar line across, maybe connecting 2 pieces, we have to look at that. We have to look at the direction that nails and fastenings were drilled and hammered. Going back a little further, for those of you that perhaps haven't been to some of these talks, in 2011, we received essentially all of this material. This material came to us in 2 pods, all wrapped up, and we had to take it apart, take everything out of the pods, and everything had to stay wet. When something is waterlogged, it has to stay wet until you're ready to treat it. And from 2011 until 2016, our only function was in our vats there in College State, or in Bryan, Texas, at our research lab. we cataloged everything, we stored everything in these vats. Then we had to make sure the water stayed at the right level. We had to check for biodeterioration, make sure there's no bacteria or fungal matter in the water, algae or any other single cell organisms that would degrade wood. So that was our function. That function was there only while the folks in New York figured out what they actually were going to do to it. As Mike said, the AKR archaeologists and everybody else that they had assembled had 9 days total to totally unearth this ship, try to keep some context so the artifacts that they found as they were going down could have some meaning at the end, and then take the ship apart, wrap everything up, and get it to an intermediate conservation facility in Maryland. And then, as I said, 9 months later, it all came to us. Starting in 2016, once all the agreements were signed, once there was a final destination set for the artifact itself, we set out to work. Our first function was to laser scan each and every object here, you see. Even some of the broken pieces that you see on the floor over there if you walk along the railing, they were all laser scanned, and from the laser scan, a three-dimensional model was made. That was our initial documentation. We also took a lot of photographs and increased the documentation pool, the corpus of evidence that we have, because all of our evidence is in these artifacts. It may look like a piece of rotten wood that's bending and breaking if we don't do something with it, but it's an artifact and it has to be treated as such. So with that, it took us about 9 months to scan all 800 pieces and get them together. One of my colleagues turned it into his doctoral dissertation. And then we were able to start getting a feel for what this ship looked like and how it was. You have to remember, it had a great big building built on top of it. So in the mud, it had changed its shape a little bit. It wasn't quite the same as you'll see it when it's back up here, especially in the stern where the cant timbers or framing in the stern fell out. If you looked at it going down from the overhead in the field, you would see this big rounded shape, and it's actually a lot more pointy. So we're going to put it all back together the way it is. So what I want to do right now is start showing you what we have to do to put this back together. You can see some folks in the back. They're still working, and I'll get to that in a moment. But we're going to start right here along the base because we have it set up for right now. It's going to be taken down this afternoon so we can finish painting some of the parts and finish ferrying it in. So we have a center line piece right here. Find it again. Sorry. Hello.
Nice doorbell.
Okay, so the parts that I have on right now, that's just the base. It's the base that everything is going to sit on. Just like a house, we have to have a really strong foundation to make sure that this is going to be here. We know it's going to be here at the museum for at least another 25 years. That's what the agreement says. So it has to be stable for that amount of time. So the big iron piece you see down the center is this piece right here. We have the other two longitudinals all ready to go against the wall. And then we have the whole thing sitting on 2x2 steel squares. They're also over here. They'll go transverse or across the ship underneath, and they'll all tie and pin together. Now, the next big thing to have, the first big thing to have to deal with is this item. And that's the keel. You see the keel right here? Keel is one of the most important features of any ship. The fact it's the strong back. Everything's built upon it. And if you don't have this right, you're not going to have the rest of it right. So, unfortunately, it had to be broken in the field in 3 places. We've done our very best to marry it back together. We're now within about 1/8 of an inch. In fact, I've done such a great job, you can't even see it from where we are. If you were to look down, you can see the holes that they had to bore in it to break it. So, this is one of the most important aspects of it. Everything sits upon it, and that's a problem. Because ships aren't intended to be in museums. This ship now has had 3 different lives. It had what we believe its first life was a gunboat in Philadelphia, protecting Delaware Bay and Delaware River in the city of Philadelphia. Then it had a second career. It was part of the fill of Manhattan. It was there to bulk up all the fill. It was pulled up on the shoreline, filled it in, and filled in behind it, built some cribbing around it, and bit by bit, it became part of Manhattan. Second career. Third career now is a museum artifact, is a museum attraction. We want to try to be as careful with this and keep the integrity of this artifact as much as possible. However, this artifact was never intended to be in a museum. It does not have the shape which will be conducive to be in this museum. So we have to add some, we have to do little bits here and there to add to it. But first and foremost, as I said, this is the most important part. You can see the shape of this green foam underneath. This is a very hard urethane foam, which we've actually carved into. The underside of this keel is incredibly eroded. It's had tornado worms. It's had 250 years of sitting in the muck and the mud. And if you look all the way to the end, it also slopes up. We need this top. We need the whole thing supported, but we need this top to be level because it was originally built level. And we don't try to redo the same, we're never going to get back together. So we've had to work pretty hard in maintaining this shape all the way up. And then, so we don't crush anything, these pedestals underneath, they've actually been machined inside. So this is just a example. We're just using some wood to hold it into place. This piece will go all the way down. It sockets into this piece 4 inches. We'll cut it off here, and then anything that sits on top of the floors will go across at these spots. So where the floors sit, it will not depress and damage the keel at all. Keel is its own separate entity right now. But we're still using these posts because these posts, give me 1 second, I will catch up to my drawing where I am. Okay, so there are the centerline pieces. And I've got a keel base plate and a keel support. So that's basically what you see right now on the floor. The biggest thing that we've been working with recently, this past week and a half, because it's been so important. You see the black piece that's suspended on top of the ship right now. It is just like these, already supported in the right position. There are aluminum pieces right where my finger is. This aluminum plate will then be connected to that great big timber that Scott is working on. And this timber weighs 370 pounds. I know that because we weighed it the other day. So that timber is the next thing to go up. And that holds the shape. It's called the stern lean. It is a pretty substantial piece of timber. It's the biggest piece of timber in this position, or I've ever worked with. Normally what you could do is, you wouldn't need all this. You could have one piece of wood going here, straight across, then you can have a smaller knee right there. This is one portion of the tree. The trunk of the tree, it goes on this axis, the root of the tree goes on this axis, and that means all of this here follows the grain of the timber. Makes it stronger, makes our job a lot harder. But again, just as you can see in the back, how eroded the back end is. If we were to try to put that knee up there, not only were we trying to balance it and it wouldn't work very well, we would just crush everything back there. So that's what you see right now. But this afternoon, we'll be able to set the knee, make sure to make our final mock-up, the last holes in the this plate right here for the stern post, and then we'll take it all apart very frequently. We have to bore out some holes. We have to do some painting. But starting next week, the first thing that will go on are these floors. And you can see the floors there's some over here that Melissa's working on right now. The rest have all been cleaned. They're ready to go. And what we'll do is we'll put them up, and they'll sit on pads on top, right where each one of these rods are. We'll build a small little plate that won't be able to push past the rod, and that will level everything out, and we can get those in a position where we can use them a little bit more effectively. Now, this is going to be a little back and forth because I'm not going to put I can't turn around and just undo a layer for every single piece. So once those go up, we are going to put some supports on either side to keep them balanced right where I'm putting my cursor up and down. So we'll have about this rectangle of space to work, because the next thing that's going to go on are some additional framing that we have. As you can see, that's kind of the shape of the ship that we have. That's what this model has allowed us to do, is we've been able to line up all the holes, line up the shapes that we need, and pre-construct a considerable amount of material. Otherwise, we'll be here forever trying to get this done. So we'll set up the floors, we'll set up the frames, we'll set up the supports on the outside, and once that is done, we will begin to, where is it, it's here somewhere. There it is. We'll start putting on the outer planking. Now, we're not going to put on all the outer planking at one time. We're going to, because the ship is so fragile, once we start doing all this, nobody can walk down the middle of it. So we're actually going to do 1 or 2 runs of planking, and then we're going to do 1 or 2 runs of the ceiling plank. Now, the ceiling plank, and so it may take a second to come up, because it's so big. This whole model is 5 gigs. So we'll do some of the there it goes. So you can see how ragged that kind of looks, but that is the remains of the ceiling plank, and how much was on the inside. We do have a couple of extra pieces in there. Unfortunately, the tags along the way became disassociated, so we will have to figure out all the pieces and how they go together. So once we start putting the ceiling plank back in and the hull planking back in, Because every time we do something, it makes the whole thing a little bit more stable, and it also directs us with what we can do. So we have one more large piece to put on. It's a piece that's over to where that laser beam's going up the column there. And that piece is called the keelson. And that's a big timber. Let me take off the ceiling planking again so you can see that. So this piece right here, the whole idea behind this is a sandwich construction where you have the keel on the bottom, then you have the floors going across it, then you have a keelson going down the other side, and they're all bolted together. And that made a very strong sandwich construction to hold the center line even and together. So we'll put that on, and that'll sit with some just some very thin foam underneath, but directly on the floors. And as I said, that's when the too many layers here. That's when we'll work on both the framing and the floors. Framing, the hull planking and the ceiling planking. Now, we do have some material at the end. You can see where this one frame is right here, and we don't have much timber. Well, we will have timber because those are specifically called cant frames. They're framing, however, they help shape the back. And until we get some of the planking in, we're not going to have any place to put them. If we tried to put one up right here, it would just fall through, basically. So we're going to put some planking in first to hold everything, and then we're going to put the cant frames in. And these cant frames really start to show you the shape of the stern. These were the ones in the field that you looked at when they did the laser scanning. You looked down and it looked like you had a rounded stern. Well, it looked like a rounded stern because they had just all fallen flat. They had a building put up on them. So we'll be putting all those in as we build up the sides and the hull planking, sorry. And as that goes in, so before we totally cut off all of our space, we're going to be putting in there's a small little deck, which are the stern sheets. If you know anything about duvet sailing or open topic like this, you frequently have just a platform to stand on while you're steering. And they're called the stern sheets. This is what remains of the stern sheets. We also have to figure out how to hold them all together, so we do have a whole system that right here, that will be installed to support them. And that is pretty much what we have of all of this timber that you see here when it goes back on board. The final thing for us to do is to put in a column where our temporary supports will be. We'll put in a beam and column support to hold the centroids. So the whole thing will be a tri-point connection. And then the museum didn't know exactly if this was going to be the spot for all time. So what we also designed is a way for them to move it. So the whole thing will have H-beams underneath it. And these H-beams will have some caps on them. And attached to the caps are going to be boat trailer jacks. So there's 7 beams, 14 people to move this. All they have to do is sit there and crank together, bit by bit. The whole thing will rise in the air. And once it's risen to the correct height, we have casters that will go up underneath the H-beams, tab in, and then anywhere in this exhibit, or actually even out into another portion of the museum, They, 14 people, and how many other people want to push, can row your boat out of the museum. Apart from just the physical construction, we've at the far end down there, we've been doing a lot of cleaning. All the timber has a little bit of gunk still left in it from the vats. Polyethylene glycol was used to displace the water inside the wood. That has a residual effect. Sometimes there's a little bit that stays on the surfaces. So we've actually got to steam clean that off, and that's what that big table is. Two big tables are down there. Over on this side, as you can see, my crew working away, they are actually repairing some of the timbers. They have some of them cracked, some have lost pieces, and we're gluing and pinning pieces back together over there. And then we have here, the four of us are incredibly lucky to be hosted by this museum. There are some incredible craftsmen at this museum. And I hope they're gone, so they don't get big heads or anything. But no, they're fabulous. So two in particular, Scott and Mike have been helping. Scott came up with a way of helping to get nails out of the timber. Nails were degraded to such an extent. This entire ship was nailed together. That's one of the reasons why we've come to the determination of what it was. But if you think about it, wherever you have a frame and a plank crossing it, you have two of these, at least. So we're talking probably about 1,800 of these little these little fasteners. Actually, they're not so little. Fasteners that have to now come out. We've, in about a 3-year period between 2017 and 2020, it was great during the pandemic because we just leave each other alone and go about the wonderful task of extracting all of these little nails and spikes. Unfortunately, we couldn't get all of them out. Some, such as this one, this is a pretty hefty spike in a hole. It's not like we can just use a claw hammer and start ripping at it. Scott came up with a very inventive way of tapping just the end of it and then creating a little pulling device that will slowly pull it out and extract it. And that's what, did you get the other one now? Yeah, so far today, in the last hour, he's gotten 2 of them out. He's only got about 100 to go. We want these out for 2 reasons. One, they're iron. We tried to stabilize the iron for the most part in the conservation process. But iron never wants to remain what we make it. It will always start to degrade. It will always start to oxidize. So we don't want that causing any problems down the line. For 3 years, while we were trying to extract these, we also had 5 different vats of ammonium citrate, which is a chelation agent for iron, and that got into the wood and actually pulled iron out of the wood. The reason for that is there's also what we know are sulfates in the water. It was in a fill area, so there are a lot of sulfides. Once covered over in an anaerobic or airless environment, the bacteria, there's certain bacteria, I should say, that like to do nothing but degrade and reduce sulfur. They reduce sulfur and sulfate, to sulfide. Now, sulfide, remember your chemistry, has a cation with one. Has one wants to gain 1 electron. Iron wants to get rid of 2. So you create you bond the sulfide to the iron, and you make pyrite. Pyrite inside the wood has for example, has a atomic size of 1. But the oxidation products of pyrite have a atomic size of 7 and 8. So you can imagine if you've got this inside your wood, even on the microscopic atomic level, what's going to happen? It's going to build and build and build. It has to go somewhere. So if you can't find a way out, it's just going to start bursting your wood right along and cleaving it right along the grain lines. So it'll find a weak spot and it'll just start going up. And there's a gray powder that comes out as well. The whole thing creates acid hydrolysis. So the powder that comes out, if it mixes with enough moisture in the air, can make sulfuric acid, which has a, in this case usually, because it's in the powder form, it's not in the pure form, has a pH of about 3, 3.2, 3.3. It's enough that it'll burn you a little bit if you hold your finger on it. It will do a lot of damage to wood because, again, we want this thing to last 25 years, 50 years, 100 years. So over that time, we want to try to do as much as we can now to preserve it, not just for the next year, the next, I guess 8 years. I've been told that it's probably going to be in this exhibit area in one configuration or another, but we want it to last even longer. The other gunboat in the United States, which is on display, which is the Philadelphia from Lake Champlain down in the Smithsonian, it's already been on display since 1965. So we're talking about these things not going anywhere once you get it. But I'm going to put this over here in a cart. Mike's got some other things to show you over here that are boat-like, and you can certainly see what all that's about. That's kind of where we are right now. If there are any questions, I'd love to answer them. Sure.
What happened to the bow?
Well, if you may be able to look at the montage of photographs there from the thing, right about here and right about here. In 1967, an excavator went through to put a big slurry wall. And so the folks at AKRF, the archaeologist who was on the scene that day, was able to stop construction once the original timbers came out. They were there because we now have certain laws in this country. In 1966, the United States government passed a law called the Federal Historic Preservation Act. As part of that act, if you have what's called a federal undertaking, which means if federal money is involved, if you needed an EPA permit, that's an undertaking. That causes. So what you also have to do is you have to have a cultural plan. If you find anything, what are you going to do? You just can't put it in a dumpster and say, that doesn't mean anything to me, because it probably means something to somebody else. So didn't have that in '67. Maybe they would have seen it. Maybe they did see it. Who knows? I was barely enough to get out of my crib at that point. So they had that down. In 2010, the folks stopped. They all got down in the pit. They started looking. They all had conferences. I wasn't there. I just get to talk about it now. They had meetings with folks in suits, etc. They gave them the 9 days to get everything out. Can you imagine what the power of this is? They stopped construction. Granted, they were still working behind, they were still working around, but right there was the archaeologist's purview. In 2011, the archaeologists involved went to the other side of the wall, and they found a piece of the bow. So I can hold up right here. It's not much. So they found that piece of the bow and a couple of disarticulated timbers out there. So because we did have that piece of the bow, we can actually interpret the length of the ship. And when we went to use our model maker, put the ship together in this size, all of the planking, all of the framing fared in. So we are confident of the size, the length of the ship, and that when they put the wall, you can see the width of the wall now. When they put that wall in, they didn't actually disrupt the bow at all. It's maybe a couple inches, but everything still fits in our scratch-built model of what the hull and how the hull was, should be and how the hull was constructed.
Is the piece here?
Hmm?
The metal piece?
Yeah, they're right down there. Everything's here. We don't throw anything away in archaeology. Or actually, he had his hand up first.
During the initial excavation of it, standard protocols, how it's did, photographing everything, later as you mentioned a tag falling off of the piece. And only 9 days to do it. You're able to do it right.
Well, no, they had to hurry, but they did a good job. They didn't do a standard job where you just lay everything out like that. That would probably take by the time you got your datum points, by the time you got your grid in, everything else, you would have lost 2 days. They were able, however, to compartmentalize the dig. So you essentially, with the ship, you have a bowl. So, and then you have a sealed compartment underneath it. So you have things that are on top of the ship probably aren't contextual to the time of the ship being buried. You have things 5 feet on either side. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. They went down and they found this material. They mapped it in the best they could. And we still have that material that we can go back and reference to. The most important things, as they were taking the ship apart, this area here, that's between the frames and futtocks, that is contextual, or pretty close to contextual, because it was covered. It then had material kind of put upon it. So we're talking, that area between the ship frames is contextual with the period. And that's where we have a number of, we're only talking about that much space, not much at all. But that's where we also have found a lot of Revolutionary War period artifacts. That's where the button from the 52nd foot was found. That's where a lot of the shot was found. The cannonball was found. The grape shot was found. All that material was there, and a lot of faunal bones, which we can analyze in a different light later to see if we can figure out where they may have been graves themselves. So they did the best job they could, and I think they did a pretty good job. They did a great job. How did I do? How did I do? Since one of the archaeologists that did it is sitting right there. And I wasn't just saying that because she's saying that they did a pretty good job.
Another question? I don't know.
There's a gentleman over here. I'll come back to you.
I see the boat at the Smithsonian. Is this roughly the same size?
Well, actually, the boat behind, they have this boat behind you.
Yeah.
That is a gunboat, which has very similar size features to it, including although I think that lateen sail is a little bit big. But this is roughly 50 feet, and that's what ours was as well.
Yeah, and it made Philadelphia with white oak.
The entire ship is pretty much white oak as far as the framing. The keel is actually hickory. The warlock deck is pine. So, but all the hull planking, all the ceiling planking, the frames, buttocks, floors, they're all white oak. White oak, and analysis that was done by AKRF after the dig, they had special scientists come in called chronologists, and they took slices of the timber here and there. Not to ruin anything, obviously, but we use this material for tree ring dating. There are databases set up around the country in different spots, different types of material, that specialists can then get a really good profile of all the old and new growth rings on a piece of timber, and then look at their database, and they can pretty much tell you when this piece was growing. If you look at the outer ends, you can see the last felling date in that database. This timber, if I remember correctly, most of it in the cross-section was from the late to early, say, 1650 to 1725 range as far as its dates. Some a little bit older, but most importantly, as you got out to the edge, the last felling date they could find was 1773. So 1773, again, fits in with our stacking of evidence, preponderance of evidence for why we're calling it what we're calling it, why we're interpreting this ship, these remains as we are. Yeah, another.
Is there discussion about making a scale model of the complete boat? Would they use the mass and rigging, out of based on what we had?
We already have a really good start on it down at Texas A&M. We have, fortunately, we have a great big program. We have 9 different labs, and one of those labs is we have a model maker who is quite a craftsman, and he's actually one of the guys with the incredible eye that when we looked at he and I one day, or actually Mike started this whole thing, got me going, but Mike said, why did we find this button? I mean, could it be anything Revolutionary War? Well, some of the original interpretations were that it was a merchant ship that had been on the Hudson River. Well, when we started putting it back together, we knew it wasn't a merchant ship probably because there wasn't much place to put anything in the hole. The depth of the hole is only 4.5 feet. So we're talking about there, the keel, about 40 feet in a container like that. It's not very conducive to a lot of even coastal trade. However, this bow right here, this little piece, Glenn was looking at it and said, "Oh, that kind of looks like a military bow to me, something that you would make for a ship like this little gunboat." So he just picked up a book that has a lot of lines, or what we call lines, and they're orthographic projections of ships. Orthographic projection being a series of lines in 3 different dimensions, all on 2D. And he went like this. It's like, oh, there it is. And it was just then that Chris Dostal, who did the scanning and wrote his dissertation, had reconstructed our midship frame. So they took Chris's midship frame and just basically dropped it right into this ship that Glenn had found. Then we started looking at it a little bit closer, a little bit more closely, and everything just started stacking up and leading us to our current interpretation. So along with putting this digital model together, Glenn basically rebuilt this boat piece by piece the way they would have done it in his lab. It's a model which is 1 to 10. So it's 5 feet long. And right now it looks like a really good rowboat. There's a lot to do because we have a lot of interpretation, a lot of research still to do. We don't have anything from up here. So we think we know how the deck was attached. We think if it is this interpretation, how the rowing positions were fitted, because this is we call it a gunboat, but it's actually a galley. You could row it. There were the Philadelphia galleys had 2 banks of 10 people, so spaced every 5 feet apart, which would be 4 feet apart. So I think 3.7 or something is what we determined right now, that people could row without hitting the guy behind them. These are little things. We put these rowers, we put little figurines in our model. They scale out at 5 feet 6, and you can have them benched out and sitting there and say, yeah, well, look, with the swing and the catch, they work. We have historical evidence that says these oars were about 18 feet long. By the way, pretty close to what they are in the Philadelphia as well. So you have an 18-foot oar, what can you do with it? This is all experimental archaeology, working with these models. And we're trying to both prove and disprove. We're looking at it from both angles. How could it be? Why does it have to be? Could it be something else? Always, we're trying to always change that notion so we don't get too set in our ways, too set in our mind. But yeah, so far, everything we're leading to is leading to this gunboat behind you. As far as the rigging would be concerned, we know these boats had 2 masts, just like that one. So that may have been, that one would probably be a little further aft, and there would be another smaller one right about here. We're just a couple feet after the gun that they can still slide the gun back and load it. Because that gun right now is peaked out over the bow. You would have to obviously bring it back about 3 feet in order to put an 18-pound ball in there, and then do all the ramming, etc. And then you would take the whole carriage and run it back out. It was on 2 skids on either side. Anyone else?
One more, and then
Okay, then I'll get to the gentleman. Yeah, I mean, I'm here all day.
Very fabricating structural elements, but for the size of the hull and the whole the deck. Can you talk about differentiating them visually from the original material?
Oh, they will. There'll be aluminum and be black. So I'm not just like that piece is right there. That's aluminum. It's cut to the size and shape that we need it, and it's black. Anything below the keel, just like that gray there, will be gray. Anything inside will be black. Yes, we want to be authentic. We don't want to hide things, but we also don't want it to be a sore thumb sticking out and say, "Hey." So you'll be able to see, you'll be able to look, you'll be able to make that differentiation. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the analysts said went to the Caribbean.
How did we?
How did you determine that it made it to the Caribbean?
Pick up this one. Can you give me a piece of foam? I'll be able to archaeologist. Yeah, just right across the top. Other way. We'll leave this here for a second as well. But you can see right here how it looks as if we've had an invasion of powder coast beetles. These holes have all been identified back in 2010 by a gentleman whose career it was to know about Teredo. Teredo narvalis is called a shipworm. It's a small marine mollusk, primarily in warmer temperate waters, and it infests wood. we don't think not we, but it's not believed that it metabolizes the wood. It tunnels through the wood, leaving nothing but an ant colony type perforation and everything. Very large perforation, as you can see here, and at this end. Those were identified by this expert as being Caribbean tornadoes. It also happens to fit within our interpretation of the ship, because if this was a gunboat built in Philadelphia for the defense of the Delaware River and Bay, then captured by the British a couple of days, or given over to the British a couple of days after Cornwallis took control of Philadelphia in September 22nd of 1777, and kept by the British over the wintertime, used by the British. When they evacuated the following late May and June, all the loyalists wanted to go. Everybody who was part of the British realm, wanted to be remaining as part of the British realm at that time. They wanted out of Philadelphia. General Clinton, who was in charge, was supposed to put all of his troops on the transports and send them back to New York. Instead, there were so many people that wanted to go, so they all wanted to take their luggage, they all wanted to take their property. They were bigwigs in Philadelphia. That's why he made the decision to force march across the Jerseys, and that's where we had the Battle of Monmouth. We had the Battle of the Jerseys because all of his troops were basically heading back to New York. They had not sailing back. We do know, however, 5,000 of his troops that were there went immediately to the Caribbean. So this type of tornado warning, according to the experts, starts to spawn in late June, early July, which was the exact time, if they were leaving early second week of June, would have gotten down to the Caribbean. And what happens is, as I've been told, as I'm not a tornado expert, once it starts in a harbor, it's an orgy of tornado warnings. They go everywhere. If there's one, they all go, and that's why you have such infestation such as this. If that is the case, then probably ship itself lasted for another year or two, maybe. You can just rake your hand across this. It's in the keel, it's in the framing, it's in the flanking. This is one of the better pieces. But yeah, that's how we know. Oh, one more key piece of evidence. Anyone else? Do you want to do those questions?
Oh,
Right?
We have some great questions from some kids. Good. You always love kids' questions. But this is a good one. So, how many soldiers did the boat carry?
They had hoped that there could be about 40 on board. When you consider the fact that they had the big bow gun, they had 2 small howitzers on the side and 2 swivel guns, that would have taken a crew of, that would have been about 16 people right there, just for that. Now, some of them may have been the rowers, but you have 20 rowers as well. So, on top of the officers, etc., that adds up. So they were expecting about 40. Most of what I can figure out, they had about anywhere from 25 to 30, low 30s actually on board these things. They just couldn't get enough militia. They had 14 of these boats. So you're certainly not going to find 200 300 people who can actually act as marine sailors. And they were built in 1775. The British didn't get there until 1777. They were bored. It was a long time. They weren't getting paid all that much. They had to go back and tend to their own properties. So there were a lot of desertions. There were a lot of people that didn't re-up again. Some people who went and came back. It was a rather fluid period of time.
Give me one more here. How many pieces are there? That's a good one.
When it came out of the ground, we received it from AKRF and the Mac Lab. The catalog was probably about a little less than 700 pieces. It has grown to about probably 850 to 900 because we have small little pieces. You put it in. When you have a piece that looks like this and it's wet, you go to pick it up, something might break off. Now we try to immediately put it back together, but if it's in a vat and it breaks off and you move things around and suddenly you find a piece of planking that's this big, it has no tag on it. We hold it to the end, then we'll lay everything out and we'll start doing, then we'll really do the puzzle pieces.
Thanks, Peter. I've got actually, let me bring this out there. I think to be able to see better. Kind of bring it out into an open. This is part of a block and tackle. So this is a block. These little rollers, you've probably seen these. This is for, to get a mechanical advantage. So this is for lifting heavy things. So you see these all over, like in the seaport, like in the fill that we were talking about, this 22 feet of fill, you would find thousands of these things from working on the docks, but they were also on ships. So you have that. So that's from our teaching collection. That's not from the ground. So that answers your question there. This is actually from the ground, but it's in pretty good shape. So this was actually found in the ship, like right down there in the floor, under the floorboards. Mm-hmm. And so this, you can tell it's about the same size. So like that, a little pin and a sheath. So that's cool. Following up on a few things that Peter was talking about here. These are what these tree nails would look like. So, or they do look like, because that's what they are. Yeah, this is a good one. This is kind of an octagonal one. You can see how it's carved. So that would have held the ship together. So normally you'd have these tree nails or trennels, but what this had, Peter was telling you, is basically these nails like that. Mm-hmm. So, and you can see where Scott's drilled into there and taken the nail out. Mm-hmm. So that's what that is. There was something we don't have on display. They also, which was a good piece of evidence, there was a cannonball. And it's a 4-pounder cannonball, which was one that was like a French cannon, the type that the French used. But remember at this time we didn't even have a navy, so that was why they had to build these ships quickly. And they used a lot of this French artillery, so that would have been something that you would have had on one of these ships. Then lots of bones from, these are pig. So, they would have been eating. There's actually evidence of a hearth on the, we have the archaeologists right here. So that we have a ring, metal ring, and some bricks that were probably part of a hearth. So on the ship. And the Philadelphia, down at the Smithsonian, actually has one on it. I'm trying to get this open. This is just a pig femur. Wow. Pigs are easy to identify because they're short and squat. And the bones are kind of like, for that kind of a critter. So pigs, cows, there's some cow bones. So, you know, it gives you an idea what they're eating. You guys probably know what that is. You know, it's weird because we find these like on 17th century sites. These must be really robust in terms of their preservation. That's a peach pit. They're peach pits. Now you find them like there's all the time. It's like peaches. So, but then also there's gun flints. They found 3 gun flints, and these are made of Dover flint, so they're English gun flints. And these are all found in that the context that Peter was talking about between the floors. You might remember. You probably remember that. So, yeah, we got a few of those. You know, but not a lot, because if you think about it, like so if this thing was up on the shore, they probably took everything. There's no cannon, or you know, they took probably whatever off of it. They might have even taken some of the boards off of it at some point. This is kind of interesting too. Now you find these on terrestrial military sites, but marbles. So there's 2 marbles in there. Kind of interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe the soldiers had some marbles. They were playing various. You can play various games with them. So there's a couple of those. That's neat. This one I think is really cool. Personally, I really like this. This is I think it's a homemade button. It's made of leather. It's definitely a button, but I think it's just a homemade button. Somebody needed a button and they made it out of some leather. So that's kind of cool. So as opposed to this official, you know, British military button that you see over there in the display case, got this. The other thing I'd mention about this display case, so Peter, was talking about the types of artifacts at the different levels. We put that tankard in there. It was found on the site, but it's from like these higher contexts. So it could have been part of the landfill. So this thing was just, it was down on the ground and then they poured stuff on top of it. So it could be part of it's the right time period, but it could just be part of the landfill. The musket shot, the buckshot there, and the grape shot were definitely in that context, along with the spoon actually, and the mirrors. And the button. Let's see what else I have here. Oh, you always find these too. You know, I was surprised. You know, because we have a couple of like pipe bowls there, and those are the context isn't quite as good for those, but these were found down in there. You're always gonna have pipes, tobacco pipes, yeah. And a lot of times, like probably not, maybe not on a vessel like this so much, but on ocean-going vessels, the pipes a lot of times they'll be carved, short. Because for 2 reasons. It wouldn't get in the way, and then, supplies are you're out in the middle of the ocean, supplies are pretty short. So you're not going to you're going to reuse whatever you have. So pipes are very fragile. If it falls down on the deck and it breaks and it's this long, you can still use it. So you see that a lot of wear, and, a lot of wear from people holding them in their teeth while they're working on the sails or, sailing the ship or fighting or whatever. So anyway, that's a few things. It's not really about the volume of stuff; it's the evidence. So that's really what we look for. And so there's a lot of good stuff in there. Some other interesting things, but the really important stuff the really important thing about it is context, and that will help you kind of narrow down what you got. Any questions?
No.
I think there's around so for this collection, I believe it's around 7,000 artifacts total, and about 2,000 of those are really ship related, and the other ones are probably landfill, could be ship. There's some there's some degrees that you probably remember. There's some degrees. Some of them are just kind of around the ship, and then some of them are in the ship, and then some of them are really definitely associated with the ship.
A lot of stuff is just shoveled in the hole.
Yeah, it's like if you look at the big digs they've done down in the city, or even here in Albany, the way that they made this land is they do this cribbing where you have these logs stacked in sort of a box, basically fill it with garbage, and then build another one. So if you think about a ship, kind of makes a good thing to have in a landfill. It's a big thing, and it's kind of it'll hold some garbage. So one of our volunteers actually sent us a film that he found from 1903 in the city, and it shows horses backing up loads of garbage onto these big barges. You know, it's like, so it's like 1903, this film just showing, you know, and I imagine the barges are probably going to like maybe Staten Island, or I don't know if it was, isn't Staten Island, isn't that like a big garbage? Yeah, later on, okay. So they're going somewhere with it. Yeah, maybe. And it's just a really cool film. It's like, I don't know how long it's maybe a minute and a half or something, but yeah, I mean, you got a city, you got to put the stuff somewhere, and if you're building out, and you know, so when you see these, like we have a lot of these excavations from that, from Lower Manhattan, and a lot of it's just fill, but a lot of it's like river bottom. So that's not really fill, it's just like people are throwing stuff off the dock or things, you know, so you pipe stem, somebody breaks a pipe, falls into the water, whatever. So you see a lot of that, like from the 1730s or 40s, a lot of material like that, just in the river bottom. So, and you know, that can be useful if you think about just the general idea of what was happening in the city at that time. So it's all useful data. Depends on what questions you want to ask. You really want to find out what the boat is, then you got to really kind of, you know, narrow your interpret or your data that you use. Any questions? Yeah.
What related to the garbage? Are they like, did they have disposal room? Did you find them in like a room?
Oh yeah. So this was their along the top, I guess, by the, you know, toward the so you got the deck here, and then there's a space like on the side that's called an airstrake. And so Peter was suggesting like maybe some of these bones were like just thrown into that airstrake that goes in the side, because it's a, you know, you're just sitting there, you just throw them in there, and maybe that's how they got down in there. So it's a space to basically give between the, like he was talking about the ceiling planks, so between the planks, so you have the outer planks and then the ceiling planks, and then you have your beams, you know, your timbers. So you've got that space in between, and it kind of lets air get in there, so it doesn't, kind of helps it not to rot, I guess, or keep it a little bit dry, but it's still good.
It's going to be smelly after a while.
I know, it would be, right? Yeah.